Hello Thistledown Gang, Happy New Year. It's 2022. We survived, we made it to the new year. May it be better than the last. Welcome back to my channel if you've already been here. If not, hi, it's wonderful to have you here. Please stay, and by that of course I mean subscribe. Originally I wanted to make a quite different video that I filmed over the holidays, but editing it was not fun at all. You might get to see that footage at some point when I have the nerves to edit it, or to finish editing it, because I already sunk a couple of hours in there. But for now, welcome to episode 3 of my Music Box Makeover miniseries. Let's have a recap. I put the thing on a new base, painted the inside and outside, put another piece of paperboard on top, painted it some more, made this kitschy figurine look just as kitschy but make it tasteful, and painted the other one to actually not look like Flamingo Lake anymore, and that's about what happened so far. Remember how I couldn't find the footage of me applying the dark pink wash to the little adventurer rat? Guess what? I found it. It was buried in the pile of side decoration video material. I left in the paint mixing process this time because I really like to show off how many steps it took to arrive at this maroon shade that I went with in the end. It's also just a color range that I like very much. See how very watery that paint is? I just put a brush full of it into each fold of the dress and then let it flow down as I turn the figurine. I went in with a cloth and dabbed the excess off of the body to just lightly stain it rather than have visible drops of paint. Same goes for face and skin in general, just some more focused drops of paint. Let it set a while applying the rest and then gently taking off the excess watery bits. You can always repeat these steps. I'd rather dab off too much and then do it again than having too heavy a stain. I also put the wash under her chin and along her arms for a bit of shading. The figurine might be three-dimensional, but it's still very smooth and it could use a bit more texture. Getting into the folds of the petticoat also is so worth it, because it gives them a lot more depth and makes them come to life. After this little addendum to episode 2, let's go on to the actual content of this one, the sides of the music box. My first instinct was to go with a swan motif, matching the Swan Lake tune of the box. I mean, of course it would be. The little rat on top, however, isn't technical or precise. She's adventurous and she cherishes the tiny things, and she's in there for the joy of dance rather than perfection and ambition. And the outside of the box represents her much more than Odette on the inside, and I wanted something to match her, rather than that big stage. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, this is the point in this video where I recommend you pause it to If you have no idea what I'm talking about, this is the point of this video where I recommend you pause and catch up by watching the other 2 episodes, which are linked down in the description. I very roughly sketched out my idea and then blocked the design out with, I don't even think it's gesso this time, it might as well just be white acrylic paint, and 2 layers of that to get a decent coverage. Now this is my actual, air quotes, canvas, where I can map out my motif a bit more detailed. Wild roses are some of my favorite flowers ever, and they share the little rat's color scheme, so that was a good way to tie everything together, and I think might have already noticed this pattern with me. I really enjoyed drawing and painting banners and ribbons, and they fit very well into the theme complex of ballet and 80s and early 90s romantic kitsch. The thing with plain acrylics though is that you have to decide how the ribbon flows pretty early on, so what goes underwhere and which parts fold over what. Because the brush strokes will be somewhat visible, and changing your opinion later would make the design go against the grain of the paint, if you will. Remixing the color of the little rat's dress was quite a pain. I should probably invest in some airtight paint containers at some point, but I most likely won't, because in the end I don't use acrylics all that often. Especially not in that amount. You don't need that much when you usually paint on a very tiny scale. And because just the flowers would be boring, I went and added a few bumblebees. 2 on this side and 1 on the other, because nobody wants to paint the exact same thing twice. I love bumblebees. The word alone, I mean like bumble. Bombus, the Latin name, is amazing too. I wish I could have a bumblebee as a pet, like a dog-sized one. Very deep hum, probably gets all my paper stuff in a mess once it flaps its wings. Does that even count as flapping? I mean, it's more like a zip, but I really don't know the technical terms for that. And also imagine how very fluffy that thing would be, and it would also be very fun to go on walkies with, and it would drag me around. And time for the first shade layer of the ribbon, just to get some dimension in there. The second shade layer provides more depth, so that the base color essentially becomes highlights. The first shade layer becomes the color of the ribbon itself, and the second shade layer becomes the actual shadows, and also I use that for the outlines. I'm really not used to working completely without outlines. I know it's very much what's being done at the moment, especially in web design and contemporary illustration, but I'm too old-fashioned and analog for that, I guess. But I'm kind of working on it. I'm also too deep in my habits as someone who started drawing inspired by turn-of-the-century illustration and comics. I will, by the way, only be showing the progress for one side. The other one is quite similar, not entirely, but the theme and the components, and I only have so much nerve to time-lapse things. Now, the leaves were kind of bothering me. Where they fit in with the overall color scheme of the box, they aren't very natural. And while this is not a 100% realism venture, I still wanted them to bring that contrast to the petals that is so lush and so pretty with real wild roses. So I changed it to a more green and less teal hue, and I think it works. But, yeah. Back to the bumblebees. I had sketched them out without a reference, and they were a bit too bee-ish and waspish and a bit too, I don't quite know what. I didn't like them as much as I wanted to, so I got myself a reference and changed them up a bit. Bigger butts, longer wings, actual legs, the works, and that's much more like what I had imagined in the first place. And God, I love their little legs. They're so, look at them. Oh, so tiny and frail and cute. Oh. It's not perfectly visible, but I left the original color of the wings that I had painted them with the first time visible on the lower end as a shading of sorts, so I wouldn't have to do that later. And rather than using the lighter stripes as my base, I decided to first color in the bumbles with a raw umber. Did I buy a big tube of that stuff recently just because I use it so much? Yes I did. Look at me getting the hang of acrylics. Finally, ish. As I said in one of the other videos, I get most of my paint at the German equivalent of a dollar store or affordable home goods places. But ages ago I picked up a set of 16 or something good acrylic paints at TK Maxx, which helps me to choose which more posh colors, posh in air quotes by the way, colors get from the actual art store, because I use them a lot. But I digress. Now we finally get some individual petals and structure to this flower instead of it being just a pink blob. This could still turn out to be a hibiscus flower though, but it won't. And once again, more of my hair than you ever cared for. We'll see if I can keep my head out of frame in the next close-up project, because it won't happen in this one. It's funny, wild roses are something I've seen so often in my life, and still I couldn't perfectly tell you how the progression of color throughout the petals work. Isn't that strange how we sometimes have the picture of something in our heads, and when we try to look at the details, they just vanish or become a cluster of shapes and colors and just blur into each other? It's like reading in dreams where you see the individual letters and they probably make sense, but you couldn't tell anyone what the sequence of symbols right there means. Wild roses are something that is far easier painted in watercolors than in acrylics. I don't think acrylics do them a lot of justice. Sure, I mean I can blend and blend and blend, but it will always be too heavy, too substantial. Alas, acrylics is what we got here, and now we'll have to make do. Texturing the leaves was a lot of fun. I've never done it like that. I intend to draw the veins on a leaf from the inside out rather than defining the edges first and then basically extrapolating from there. But in hindsight, they could have used another layer for either shading or highlighting. Bygones. The lacking coverage of the paint that I used for the bumble stripes actually provided the perfect shading already. I'm still surprised how easy it was to get the right texture and gradient there. The paint and brush really did half of the work for me. I added some shading on the ends of the stripes to get the bumbles really plush and cuddly though, and then refreshed the umber lines as well. These bumblebee legs have to be my second favorite detail on these side motifs overall, because they turned out so well and so cute. I might have mentioned this before, but ugh, so adorable. And I'm well patting myself on the back here. Don't get me wrong. I'm not even ashamed of that. And the veins on their wings is my favorite detail. I'm so pleased with those. They were a bit risky because I hadn't sketched them out and they had to be the same on both wings, and there was the risk of the paint being too dark or too light or the wrong subtle shade or the lines too thick or the paint not smooth enough, but in the end they turned out as delicate as I could personally go with acrylics. And exactly right, and I'm so happy and thankful that it all worked out, and I still marvel at my own work here. And on this note, we'll end this side quest. I'm so funny. It's amazing. Next time, we'll already have a look at the finished and final assembly of the music box. Grand finale! Such excitement. I hope you all had a wonderful start in the new year, and even if you didn't, I wish you a wonderful time until we meet again. Farewell.